I try to find ways to interview for grit and learning mindset and endurance and just fit to those values.
This is the Job Stories Podcast, how people find work that matters. Just to kind of preface what this is, we call this the Job Stories Podcast. So our goal is just to, build relationships and celebrate stories. So we ultimately today, the heart of this is just to talk with you about your story. We just want to ask you questions about you and your career path. And so that's kind of the heart of today. So just getting right into it, if you don't mind, John, just kind of introduce yourself just so we'll have that on here and tell us about what your job is now, and just get into your story a little bit, your career path. You can go as far back of kind of how it started for you and up to where you are now.
Hey, John, I would love to have you do that, but let me also preface this conversation with, do you have anywhere that you would like people to connect with you? Like maybe a Twitter or a LinkedIn or your website, or where would you like people to go to connect with you?
Yeah, I think probably Twitter,
Okay.
which is at John G. Bass.
Okay.
Or my LinkedIn is kind of where those are the two places I tend to be most frequently.
So I think at the end of the episode, I'll just say, is there any place where you would like people to connect with you? And then you can kind of take the lead from there. Does that sound okay?
Yeah. Yeah.
We are ready when you are, sir. Thank you so much.
Oh man. All right. So I'll try to make this as interesting as I can. I think the through lines of my career have been healthcare. My entire professional career has been focused on healthcare. And I have a real passion for using technology to improve and empower the health of individuals and communities. And I think the idea of a community that can be defined a bunch of different ways. My career, my healthcare career kind of started after college. I left UNC and joined a startup. First I joined Vanderbilt Medical Center coming out of school. And I helped to run the division of trauma at Vanderbilt. And I helped manage the business office there, and I helped to do a lot of research. And this was in the 90s. And so there was this whole internet thing that was kind of starting. And so I got into that stuff. I started doing things like I built one of the first websites for Vanderbilt Medical Center, the Division of Trauma website.
Oh,
and so
cool.
I kind of learned how to do that.
Cool.
And so, after being there for a while and getting into research and getting into tech, and I was fortunate to join a group of people who were starting impacthealth.com. And this was one of the early kind of B2B exchanges, .com exchanges coming to healthcare. And so back in those days, like these B2B exchanges were being introduced to help start moving data between organizations and replacing manual processes like phones and faxes. And so pretty early in my career, I was so excited about that job and about that company and about the .com things that were going on. And I just literally poured every ounce of myself into that company. And I just, I worked so hard, and I was on the road 6 days a week doing implementations and trying to explain computers and the internet to people who've never used them before. And so, teaching nurses that had never used a computer how to do that and use this exchange was probably the hardest part. It was not the hardest part about what we were doing at impacthealth.com was not technical, even though that was very innovative. It was hard because it was about teaching people to do business in a new way and helping them overcome their fears of change. And there was a lot of work that we had to do there. And, eventually impacthealth.com grew up and got big and merged with a company called Metabuy, and then was acquired by a company called GHX in kind of the 2002 to 2004 timeframe, when the whole .com industry kind of consolidated. And so all of that, those early successes and those early wins evolved into kind of a consolidation. And I joined this amazing team at GHX, where I spent about 9 years. And so that whole exercise really was focused on using technology to bring organizations together and to collaborate in new ways and to work together in new ways, and to go overcome their fears of, man, I don't know if I can do that because I'm going to lose leverage in this relationship. It's this kind of adversarial trading partner relationship, where on one hand, these are trading partners who are all trying to do the same job. They're all trying to get the right product to the right patient at the right time at the right cost. But on the other hand, they're adversarial in their relationship because they're all focused on leverage and data, right? And they're trying to kind of win in kind of this cost and pricing war and those types of things. And so, we were trying to bridge those interests and create alignment through the use of technology and create a better, less expensive process for moving information between organizations. And so that kind of got into my DNA. That use of technology for collaboration kind of got into my DNA at a very early point in my career. And I kind of took that and built a career out of it. Like I said, I was there for about 8 or 9 years. I left GHX to help start another company called InVivoLink, which did something similar for orthopedic and spine subspecialties. So what we try to do there is kind of wrap the episode of care in a technical envelope, so that providers, the surgeons in their clinics, the hospital, the medical device manufacturer, the post-acute providers could all share workflows and share patient engagement activities and collect patient-reported outcomes measures to understand the relationship between products and prices and practice patterns and clinical and business efficiency. And so it was really about kind of if you think about that, it's really kind of the precursor to the value-based world that we are moving into today. And this was like in 2009. And so we were very early in kind of the value-based world. So we, again, using technology to kind of do a lot of innovating around care management and around the collection of outcomes data and the collection of practice pattern data and implant utilization data. So cost and quality data. And so that obviously created a great basis for understanding value in orthopedic and spine procedures. And so as care management and Obamacare and the ACA and value-based initiatives became more and more real in the industry, we had a nice platform that we had developed that supported those types of payment reform programs. And so we ended up selling that company to HCA after about 5 years. And so again, it was using technology to bring together these disparate parties that had a common goal, which is a good outcome for a knee replacement or a hip replacement or a spine patient, but had traditionally worked in almost kind of adversarial ways with each other. And that's just the reality of healthcare. We're kind of have this really interesting and sometimes broken relationship between commerce and care, where individual organizations' commercial interests sometimes don't always align with the the team sport that healthcare is, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, but I've been able to somehow in my career, not me, but the organizations and the amazing people that I've always worked with have been able to kind of thread those needles and find common ground and find the ability to create shared value across those networks that we've developed. And so that story that I just told is the reason that I was attracted at a very early stage in the blockchain and Web3 world. And so we had just sold NVivaLink to HCA. I was running NVivaLink as kind of a subsidiary of HCA. And I started, but my antenna was up because I was, going through this transition. And I started really becoming a part of the Ethereum and Bitcoin blockchain communities. Because back then in 2014, 2015, it was really just Bitcoin. And then in 2015, it was kind of this new Ethereum thing that was starting up. And so I had started the Nashville blockchain meetup just because it was a side passion of mine. And I really got excited about the community that was developing. And I started getting more and more interested in kind of Ethereum and what the Ethereum community was doing around broadening the definition of an asset and making the blockchain more of a development platform than what Bitcoin had been able to do. And I started to recognize what was happening in the financial services and fintech industry and some other places where these new solutions were being born that really address these foundational issues of trust and transparency and incentive alignment that are everywhere in healthcare. And so I couldn't stop thinking about it. And so I decided to leave HCA and leave NVivaLink specifically, and start Hashed. Because I believed that it was the operating system for these parts of the healthcare industry that need trust and transparency and incentive alignment and these other characteristics that blockchains provide. And so that's what led me to creating Hashed. And that was in 2016. Well, the company started in 2016. And it's been a wild ride since then. It's been really fun and it's really maturing in some interesting ways.
That's awesome. Thank you for sharing. That's great. You mentioned something kind of early on in your career that I wanted to touch on because I think it's relevant to today's times. And just for background, Matthew and I, we're brothers. I don't know if I mentioned that, but we have an IT recruiting firm here in Nashville, specifically with healthcare. We like to help healthcare startups fill out IT teams. And so we talk to candidates a lot. And you talked about earlier about leading a team, and actually training them on the tech wasn't the biggest hurdle. It was really helping them get over the fear of change. We're seeing that a lot right now, I think, in the last 18 months since COVID, with candidates changing careers and just navigating that fear of change. I thought that was so profound when you said that. Can you mind to elaborate a little bit more on that, and even advice you might have if this podcast reaches candidates that are in the middle of change and navigating just that kind of fear of change? If that makes sense.
Oh, totally. Oh man, it's like people just fear what they don't understand. Sometimes like it's a violent fear. It's like a adverse reaction that just is almost overwhelming. And so I think, there's certain people who are kind of certain people, and at certain points in your life, you kind of are more okay with change than in others, but change is risk, right? And change is about the future, and it's about your ability to embrace the unknown. And so for a lot of people, that's really hard. And I think it is a reason why some people are more entrepreneurial than others. There are a lot of really smart people out there that aren't aren't successful sometimes at starting new initiatives or innovating because their tolerance for risk and their tolerance for the unknown are different than other people. And when I was early in my career at Impact, I just started. We kind of designed this new exchange, and I was responsible for implementing that solution at the first hospital in Richmond, Virginia. And I would go around and train all of these nurses. And so there's kind of like, and so that's the thing, that's the change management that I remember most clearly, like meeting, I remember the names of these people. And I remember what they look like because I had these oftentimes really challenging, but also very informative meetings with them where I helped them work through that fear of change. And the funny thing is that once you work through it, a lot of times those people who'd been so fearful and so resistant are oftentimes the most proud and the best advocates once you kind of get through that. And that was really interesting to me. But it's really, really hard. And we're seeing it again today. We're seeing it everywhere because there's so much change, and change is coming so much faster. And there's so many more opportunities, AKA threats, depending on your perspective. And so, that's what it is. A lot of times it's kind of your perspective on life, and are you open to new ways of doing things? What's your openness? What's your tolerance for exploration and investigation and experimentation? And so there's kind of that acceptance and willingness to experiment and explore is at an individual level, and it's at a company level. The company culture a lot of times is just very unwilling to explore and to investigate and to experiment and to look at what's possible. And I think, that's one reason you're seeing a lot of churn in the corporate kind of world. It's a tough time to be a leader, especially a technology leader at a big company, because your ground is constantly shifting underneath you. And if you don't have a support system around you, if you don't have that personality, and if you don't have a support system that allows you to try things, you're at great risk. So I empathize for a lot of those leaders out there who are kind of challenged with that position.
You said something too that really resonated with me, even personally, about dealing with fear, and it's really that unknown. And I haven't mentioned this on our podcast yet, but a big reason why I'm passionate about the healthcare community in Nashville specifically, in 2020, my wife unfortunately got diagnosed with breast cancer. She's doing really well now, but I say that to say it's because that was the most challenging thing then for us. Is it was very unknown. Like the future of that was unknown for us because obviously we never dealt with it. Nobody in our family had. So I think that has translated, and you said it, but even being a leader of mine and my brother's business now, that risk factor of starting our own company and not really knowing what's ahead, I was able to kind of weigh that a little bit better based off what I had just gone through a couple years prior with my wife, right? So that unknown is I think that's it. I think you're on it.
I'm glad she's doing better.
Yeah.
I know that must have been really scary for you guys. And, it's cool that you two brothers are doing this together. And, again, having that culture and it's driven by you two, and having kind of that support system that allows you to try things and to fail and to take risk. is the enabler, right?
Mm.
You probably wouldn't have done it without that.
Mm.
I went through the same thing, like starting a blockchain company in the healthcare space in 2016 was not advisable.
Yeah, I can guarantee you people thought, okay, what the hell is he doing? Like, I know this John guy. What's he doing? He needs to get back at HCA. I promise you that's what they were saying.
I was doing just fine at HCA. I could have stayed there forever.
Yeah.
I loved it. And but it's just one of those things. I knew something that no one else knew.
Mm.
And I got to a point where I was sure about that.
So, but I know you're telling a story, but let me interject. Do you, how did you know? I mean, what was it in your gut that you just like knew this is going to happen? It may take 5, 10, 15 years or whatever the time is, but was it just your gut that you knew you had that certainty?
I'm not the smartest guy in the world. I'm just not. And but what I think as I got older, what I think I'm good at is pattern recognition. Mm. And so I had been through these 2 companies again, where I was focused on collaboration. I was focused on this team sport of healthcare. And I was just trying to figure out why is it so hard for people to work together? And the reason is, like with GHX and with NVivaLink, like the limiting factors to those companies at the time was trust, transparency, and incentive alignment. Like getting people to collaborate, it did not scale. And value-based initiatives in healthcare have real trouble scaling, because what people do is they try to solve these team sport problems by themselves. They try to play the game alone. It's like an every CFO for him or herself world. And I saw that repeatedly over, a period of many years. And then I got involved in this community of a brand new kind of digital set of digital primitives, right? That were designed to create trust and transparency and incentive alignment across networks. And when Ethereum took the original kind of Bitcoin model of that and expanded it to where anything could be a digital asset that's tracked on a blockchain, a shared source of truth amongst a community of people who all cared about the state of that asset. And when they evolved the original Bitcoin blockchain into a development platform where you could write code on top of that shared source of truth to automate business processes or programmatically move value between organizations or individuals. When I saw that was real, and there were some specific days in my life back then when I saw evidence that was true. Back then, it really had a profound impact on me, and I could not let it go. And then something happened. I was speaking at a meeting, and I spoke just after Charlie Martin spoke. And some of the things Charlie Martin said when he spoke were exactly what I was thinking of doing. And so all of a sudden my confidence, so that's one thing that happened. The other thing that happened was a guy named David Bailey moved to Nashville, Tennessee. And David Bailey runs BTC Media. Okay. And so all of a sudden I had an expert in the blockchain world in Nashville, and I could talk with him regularly. And so it was a combination of things, of kind of a network of people who took what I felt like I knew and enabled me to not feel like I was crazy or the only one. It kind of helped me have the confidence to actually move forward with that idea. And then, so David more from a kind of a sharing ideas and things, and Charlie Martin from a financial and kind of, so I wasn't taking all the risk in starting the company. He was really excited about the same thing, and he would support me. He believed in me as a leader, even though I was way early, and he believed in the concept, even though it was way early. And we just shared, it wasn't that hard. He shared the same vision I did. And he was like, I want to do this with you.
That's awesome.
And so if it hadn't been for those two things, I don't know that it either would have taken a lot longer or it would have not happened.
As you look forward in 2022 and beyond, what skill set would you say you're trying to foster in the leadership team at Hashed Health to deal with this change? Is it 2 things, 3 things that you're trying to over and over say to the people around you to kind of make happen in the culture at your company?
Yeah, I think these aren't hard things. Number one is that we kind of all believe that healthcare and people's health is kind of fundamental, right? Like everyone has a right to healthcare. Number two is we're not going to solve any of these big foundational problems in the industry that drive all the cost and limit access if we don't collaborate. And number 3 is innovation is core to that ability to collaborate. And so, it's not just collaborate either. It's kind of this concept of radical collaboration that we really talk about a lot. And so, radical collaboration has everything to do with business models and technical models, and it's Web3 and it's blockchain that are the technical enablers for that type of radical collaboration. New business models that focus on decentralization and ownership and credible neutrality are really, really key to what we think the kind of the true solutions in healthcare to the cost problems in healthcare and access problems in healthcare will be. And then the last one that I would say is, success, our ability to succeed is dependent on endurance and evolution and having kind of a learning mindset. We have lots of ideas, but some of those ideas are early. And so placing our bets in the right places, and then having a business model at Hash, this venture studio business model that allows us to evolve with the market and endure and meet the market where it is real. I think those are really important things. So those are a couple of things that we talk about a lot at Hashed in terms of kind of values and competencies.
Are those things hard to find in let's say you have 10 positions open within your company? Is it hard to find those qualities in candidates, or are people really open to collaboration now in a world where 20 years ago they wouldn't quite have been so open to it? Have you found any trends with that?
Yeah, I think it's really hard to, it's easier to interview for job description, kind of the role. To me, it's harder to interview for those types of competencies and personalities,
like character stuff.
Yeah, character stuff. How collaborative are you? What's your how gritty are you? You can look at people's backgrounds and see things that point towards grit and point towards and you can ask certain questions like, what have you learned to do recently is one that I like to ask. Like, what new thing have you mastered recently in the last couple of years? or what, you can ask things like, what books do you read? Or like, everyone that we interview has like innovation in their resume. We kind of select for that, but it's not everyone likes innovation. But you can, I try to find ways to interview for grit and learning mindset and endurance and just fit to those values. And I don't know that I'm good at it, but I try.
I was talking to a client of ours in Kansas City, actually, and we're looking for some pretty technical roles for them, migrating data from one cloud to another. And it's got to be people that know very specific skill sets. And I was talking to the hiring manager, and I was like, okay, what skills do you want to see out of them? I was trying to get him to say like a Microsoft Azure certification or a project with AWS or all that. And he kept saying, I need them to be learning all the time. He wasn't saying they need to know this technical stuff, but he was saying like they need to be learning, evolving, changing, finding out what's new. Those are the employees I need.
Yeah. Because threat vectors are kind of everywhere, right? Like it's like it's just like, and where do you place your bets? And like, it can't be just on the CEO to stay on top of the industry trends. Everyone has to kind of have that learning mindset and be thinking about where their world is headed. And that's hard, and it requires a lot of time. It's really hard. Yeah, I don't know. It's a challenge for leaders to interview and find those types of people. But it's amazing time to be coming out of school or changing industries. I mean, things are all that change. My career, I think I've just been very lucky. But as I look back on it, it's like all that luck, all the inflection points came during times of change, right? And so for me, like some people are like, back to what we were talking about, like fear of change. I've just grown to really live on it and thrive on it. And I've built a business now, this venture studio business model that is designed for change. Right. It's we spin out new companies, and the ones we're going to spin out next year are going to look different than the ones we spin out this year. Technical models are evolving. The business models are evolving. The governance structures are evolving. And so so that's what I try to do is it's all the way down to my business model. It's designed to embrace change. And I try to find people who live that and are excited about all the change that's happening rather than fearful of it.
Yeah, that's awesome. We talk about this sometimes, but I was curious to your thoughts too, as you've been building Hashed Health, if you'd mind to touch on kind of the how you dealt with, maybe even it's just emotionally, but some of the harder times, or maybe there were people you were trying to collaborate with and you were getting no's. I mean, how do you? I'm always curious on how folks deal with that, because, like I said, it's mine and my brother's company. So hearing no's, sometimes we take it personally because it's our business, and you maybe know where I'm trying to get, but just how do you kind of manage kind of maybe the lower points that you've had as you built Hashed Health, and how that translates into celebrating wins too?
Yeah, I think, I mean, I've heard no more times than I can count. I just because, again, it was so early, especially in 16, 17.
Sure.
And so it was, we had to really focus on market development and community development kind of before anything else. And then that community development was the enabler for some yeses. So we thought first about kind of community and education and ideation and sharing of information in order to develop a market of people who are receptive to those signals. And then a subset of that market we ended up doing business with. And some members of that market ended up trying to compete with us or going and doing their own thing. But if we hadn't done that market and community development work, we never would have gotten anywhere. Because when I started Hash, we were literally standing in an empty room. And so we started doing, we did meetups, and we started a conference with BTC Media, and we started, everywhere I go around the world and speak. And ended up writing a book. I wrote articles. I wrote newsletters. I'd create videos. I would do anything I can to educate and create community and give away a lot of the knowledge that we were obtaining because we were in a privileged position of thinking about this stuff every day. And that was what started revenue and started getting yeses, because we started growing an audience of people who thought like we did, or at least subscribed to what we were thinking and wanted to learn more. And it allowed us to start advisory and consulting work. And that advisory and consulting work, a subset of that work led to experimentation, technical experimentation. And what that did was it allowed us to start understanding pattern recognition from a protocol and a technical perspective, which told us where the low-hanging fruit was in terms of building new technical models that actually worked in a space that was very immature. And so you can see how, one thing led to another, and all of a sudden you have a business. And eventually, about a year ago, we stopped advisory and services work altogether. We stopped renting out our time because we had all these amazing innovation opportunities. And we wanted to launch these new companies that were made up of these networks that we've been working on. All these networks needed a vehicle for commercialization, and we were happy to stop renting our time and become a venture studio. So that's the evolution, but it was kind of a stepwise approach towards where we are now. It didn't happen overnight. It's taken us 5 years to really start doing meaningful kind of commercial innovation work. And over that period of time, the no's have gotten less frequent. But like even last year when we were fundraising, it was like starting all over again. I heard no's everywhere because in 2019, 2020, again, healthcare and blockchain is still new, and a lot of venture capital folks were interested in it, but not wanting to actively invest, or investing in a venture studio didn't meet their investment thesis. And so, man, I heard tons of no's. And so I think it's just like celebrating the yeses that kind of, and just growing more and more confident in kind of what you're doing. And maybe it's a little bit of being naive too. Because there's a lot of obstacles, and somehow believing that you can overcome those things. Sometimes that's confidence, and sometimes it's naivete, I think, but maybe that's helpful in some ways.
Yeah. I'm speaking out of both sides of my mouth, because we did celebrate a win, truthfully, in between Christmas and New Year's, just with a candidate that we're trying to help out. I mean, just a really, really great guy. Maybe doesn't have the best background, but he's about to and close to potentially having a position that truthfully might change his family tree. I mean, he's worked his tail off through college and then his early part of his career, and he's got a chance to really do some cool things really on behalf of his family. And for us, we were just like, that's why we do this, it's about people for us. And that's why, so we're trying to focus on that kind of thing more, right?
Yeah. So making a difference in that guy's life.
That's right.
That's a big deal, man.
That's right. Matthew, do you have anything? I'm enjoying this.
Yeah. John, I think we're about to run up on our time, but where can people, I would imagine there will be somebody listening to this that either wants to come work for you or wants to follow you or your company. So where would you like people to go to connect with you or your company?
Well, the website's www.hashedhealth.com, HASHEDHEALTH.com. And so we have a careers page there. And that's where you can learn more about the company as well. And we have newsletters we publish, and you can subscribe to those newsletters on that site. I'm also on Twitter at John G. Bass, and I'm on LinkedIn. And we just hired our first community leader at Hashed for all the reasons we've talked about over the last 45 minutes. And so, again, we believe in kind of this radical collaboration. We believe in the fact that, especially in our business, in our world, community comes first, and that community leads to opportunities. And so we are always looking to grow our community and get that community engaged and involved in what we're doing, either at Hashed or with some of the startups that we're creating. And my belief is that in the future, more and more companies are going to be focusing on kind of these Web3 concepts of community first technologies, community ownership, community activation. And you think about your workforce, no longer about the FTEs at your company, but you think about your workforce as your community that extends outside of the walls of your organization. And so how do you get that community engaged in innovation, ideation, validation, commercialization activities for these new businesses we're creating? That's what we're thinking about every day. And we've so much so that we've hired Jeff Snyder to make that his full-time job. How do we open our company up to our community? How do we activate that community? And how do we engage that community in our projects? And so I don't know of any healthcare company that's so interested in engaging people who want to participate in that as Hashed. And we are going to be, over the next several months, developing and deploying more and more tools and community activation tools that enable people to get involved, whether it's as an employee of the company or as some contributor to one of our initiatives, obviously in a way that creates value for both sides. So you can follow us at Hashed or on Twitter, on LinkedIn, but know that there will be really interesting ways to get more engaged here in 2022, even if you're not working directly for Hashed.
That's awesome. Gosh, you and your company, y'all are wonderful for Nashville. That's why I love Nashville, because of people like you. I just love the community here, and you're just speaking to that with like every word out of your mouth. So appreciate you coming on, and thank you. This has been awesome.
Yeah, thanks guys. I appreciate you including me.
I can't wait. I'm already looking forward to texting Devin and singing your praises. It's been awesome. So,
thank you. I appreciate that.
Thanks, John. You have a great day.
All right, guys.
We'll talk soon.
Take it easy. Bye.
You too. Appreciate you.